Good morning and welcome to the Innovations in Plant Breeding Virtual Media Tour. I'm Bethany Shively, Vice President of Strategic Communications for the American Seed Trade Association, and we're really excited to have you here to join us over these next 2 days as we hear from public and private sector plant breeders about some of the latest innovations in plant breeding innovation and how they impact our planet, our health, and our food. Our speakers here today are mainly representing sites in Florida, which, as you know, is a hub for fruit and vegetable production. However, seed is truly a global industry, and the companies that we'll hear from have a strong presence internationally, so we'll certainly get a perspective on global issues throughout the tour. As you have questions during the program, please type them in the chat box, which you'll see below the screen here. And following each of the presentations, we'll have time for Q&A, so we'll be noting those questions and we'll be sure to ask them. Additional information, including speaker bios, headshots, and supporting resources are available also on this screen. If you have trouble finding anything that you need, please feel free to send us a note in the chat box and we'll do our best to respond. And now to officially kick off the program, I'd like to hand it over to ASTA's President and CEO, Andy Levine. Andy?
Thanks, Bethany, and welcome to everyone. For those of you who may not be familiar with the American Seed Trade Association, the association was founded in 1883 and represents over 750 companies involved in seed production, plant breeding, and related industries throughout North America and the world. Our broad membership offers seed varieties from alfalfa to zucchini in all production types, including conventional, organic, and biotech. ASTA promotes the development of better seed to produce better crops for a better quality of life. Whether you consider yourself a foodie, a gardener, or simply a purchaser and consumer of food, we all know that today we enjoy fruits and vegetables that are more diverse, higher quality, and better tasting than ever. The abundance of superior produce is a direct result of advancements in plant breeding. And as we say at ASTA, it all starts with a seed. From rapidly evolving pest and disease pressures to a changing climate and food security challenges amidst a global pandemic, plant breeders and plant breeding techniques are constantly evolving to keep pace with new and emerging challenges, and just as they've been doing for hundreds of years. With today's innovations and better understanding of plant genetics, we now have access to better tools than ever before to quickly, precisely, and efficiently provide farmers with better seed for better crops and a better environment. With that, I'd like to hand it over to Mike Joyner to give a friendly Florida welcome on behalf of the Florida Fruit and Vegetable Association. Take it away, Mike.
Good morning. I'm Mike Joyner, and I serve as the president of the Florida Fruit and Vegetable Association. We're a membership group that represents growers and shippers and packers throughout Florida, and we've been around for more than 75 years. Now, it's my pleasure this morning to introduce a video to you that will highlight agriculture's impact on Florida. It'll show you the rich history of ag in Florida and this bright future. None of this would be possible if not for advancements in plant breeding. I'm excited that you're going to get a chance over the next couple of days to learn more about that piece, that critical piece of our industry. So join me as we watch this video together. You hear from our growers and you learn a little bit more about what they do and this impact that they have on Florida's economy. Thanks.
Florida agriculture has a compelling story to tell. It's the story of farmers, their love for the land, and an industry that helps power our state's economy. It's a story that's been written one generation at a time, by families whose drive and dedication put food on our tables every day.
Farming is full of challenges and uncertainties. We have the weather, pest, but yet the thing that inspires me the most is that I can problem solve these and help feed the world.
The numbers alone tell the story of a thriving industry. Farming is a force that fuels our economy, creating jobs and supporting communities. Florida agriculture and its related industries account for 1.52 million jobs, 14.3% of all jobs in the state. Statewide, revenue adds up to $148.6 billion a year. Almost 8,000 farms, totaling 850,000 acres, produce Florida's bounty of fruits and vegetables. Our state's farmers feed the country, especially in the winter. Florida holds the top spot in the nation in growing many of the fresh fruits and vegetables that consumers crave. The Sunshine State ranks #1 in the U.S. for producing grapefruit, snap beans, squash, sugarcane, cucumbers, oranges, tomatoes, and watermelons.
I think for agriculture to survive, our population's really lost track of where their food supply comes from. So we take every opportunity to try and educate the public on who we are, that there is agriculture in Florida. Yes, we grow potatoes in Florida, and kind of let people know how sophisticated we are. We're neighbors, we grow up in the community, and the support of us, our future is dependent on them and understanding who we are and what we do.
The story of Florida agriculture is also a story of change. Today's farmers continue to build on the legacy of those who came before while keeping their eyes focused firmly on the future.
Even with all the labor, water issues that we face, again, it just goes back to family heritage. I'm a fourth-generation farmer here in Belglade, Florida, and I want to make sure that I'm able to tell my kids I was part of that heritage that will hopefully be passed down for many generations to come.
Growers see a future full of opportunity, protecting the land and water for generations to come. By using technology, they grow more food on less land with fewer chemicals. Crop rotation, fuel efficiency, laser leveling, and precision application ensure they only use what they need and no more. Their focus is on conserving precious water and soil resources and reducing pollution so they can continue to farm. Over the past 20 years, South Florida's sugarcane farmers have reduced phosphate in water leaving their farms by 56% and have been recognized by the state for their efforts. But they're just one example of putting best management practices to work.
Environmental stewardship is very important to us here at the company, whether it's soil issues, water quality, how we're going to protect our crops. It's always at the forefront of our mind, making sure that what we do is safe for the consumer and safe for the environment.
Behind the economic engine are the people who farm. Their individual stories tell of determination and innovation. For most, their operations are family businesses that have flourished for generations. They're driven by a love for the land and a passion for meeting head-on the daily challenges of growing food.
Being a farmer is unlike any other occupation. It's, all business owners are independent, but being a farmer, you're independent, but you are working with the elements that you have no control over. It's such a challenge. You've got market, you've got labor, you've got weather. Very seldom is everything just right, but when it is just right, it's perfect.
Despite the challenges, Florida's producers say they wouldn't have it any other way. Their way of life, their love of the land, and the opportunity to feed America safe, nutritious produce all add up to a rich legacy and a bright future. And that's quite a story.
Thanks, Mike. We're really excited to be here virtually in the great state of Florida. So on the agenda today, we'll be hearing from the University of Florida, H.M. Klaus, BASF, and Reich Swan. Tomorrow, we'll hear from Bayer and Syngenta, and University of Florida will be back to close it out with an inside look at emerging innovations like gene editing and what they'll mean for our future. So make sure you stick around and join us for the full program. And now I'll hand it over to our first speaker, Dr. Patricio Munoz, scientist and professor at the University of Florida's Institute of Food and Agricultural Sciences. Patricio?
Hello, Bethany, and thanks for the organizer for inviting me to share our work of Blueberries. So let me share my screen here and have it ready to go. So I imagine you can, in these moments, you can see my screen. Okay, I'm ready to go. So the idea today, I'm going to be talking to you about the history of blueberries and how blueberry in reality came to be. I'm also going to be talking about the impact that plant breeding has had in Florida and globally through the example of Blueberry. We're going to be continue talking a little bit about our program, also about the methods of plant breeding that we're using today, how they are going to have been evolving, since the program started back in the 50s. And finally, I'm going to be talking a little bit about the research that we do in our program. So let's go, let's start this presentation then. So we're going to be talking about high bush blueberry, and that's typically the blueberry that you eat for fresh, that you find in the supermarket in the fresh aisle. So let me tell you that how blueberries came to be domesticated and the impact that plant breeding has had in this domestication. Not every day we have the opportunity to have a crop that actually we can track every single step of the domestication and the breeding that has been done. So before the 1900s, blueberry could not be cultivated. And it was Dr. Coville, in the north, that was actually able, after many attempts to grow blueberry or domesticate blueberry, that actually the acid soils were the key to actually being able to propagate and maintain a good orchard. Then later, he was working with Elizabeth White. They worked together actually to select the first cultivars, and the first cultivars of varieties of blueberry came directly from the wild, selections from the wild. So great, now we have blueberry growing in the north of the country. However, blueberry at that time could not be grown commercially in the south of the country, or specifically in Florida. So the main two issues that why blueberry could not be grown in Florida was the first one, the chilling requirements. Blueberry required a lot higher chilling that we could provide here, or the weather or the climate could provide here in Florida. So the chilling is the amount of hours that you need between 32 and 45 degrees Fahrenheit for the plant to wake up, so it's basically to take out the plant out of dormancy. The second issue that we have at that time, it was pests and diseases that will eat the plant to the ground, literally. Fortunately, we have many different wild species in Florida, and here I'm showing some of them. And for example, you see the one down here, Vaccinum ashii, or also known as rabidite. It has the characteristics of the blueberries that you find in the market, and actually nowadays you also could find some of those in the supermarket. However, it didn't have the fruit quality characteristics that the market needed. So as you imagine, we have a northern high bush, the one that could be grown in the north, with large fruit and good quality, but it was not adapted to Florida. But in Florida, we did have, fruit that has a smaller fruit, but bushes or plants that were adapted to the climate that we have here. But they were not enough for the market. So the plant breeder started to work, as we usually do. So in that moment, they crossed the northern varieties with the southern ones to finally, and that was the work of Dr. Chalf, Wayne Sherman, and also George Darrow from the USDA, the first two from University of Florida. And basically that's how they developed what we know nowadays as southern high bush. So southern high bush, in summary, is the product of the hybridization of the northern varieties with higher fruit quality characteristics and better yields, with the locally adapted, species for Florida. And here I'm just using one of them, Vaccinum darrowi, but in reality there were many others used in this process to form what we know nowadays as southern high bush. Southern high bush now then, it has low chill requirement. It could be cultivated through the whole south of the U.S. and all the way to California, Texas, Alabama, Mississippi, Georgia, and actually all varieties grow all the way to North Carolina. And so it has greatly expanded the production around the whole country. So now we can say that we could, or in that time, we are talking about 1976, more or less, that blueberries could grow, or the traditional blueberries could grow in Florida. And with that, I can tell you that nowadays we have an industry that we have around 50 to 60 farms. This data is out of the survey that we in our program carry every single year after the season to find out what are the challenges that the producers face after each year season. We have around 5,400 acres, and we produce around, in average, 20 million pounds of fruit. And that's the first fruit that you eat in the season, the first fresh fruit produced in the country that you eat in the season. So basically that goes all the way from March to the beginning of May, more or less, is the season for Florida. So not only that, not only we expanded the production and we were able to produce a lot earlier fruit here in the US, but the creation of this new varietal, type, it was able to expand the production to subtropical and tropical areas around the whole globe. And that's been very relevant because the production of blueberries has been increasing steadily, all the way back from 2005, globally, and also here in the US. And that's why we, in particular here in the US, we eat a lot of blueberries. And so just to give you a reference, back in 2017, the US produced 40% of the global production, but we ate more than 60% of the whole blueberries that were producing globally. So there was a lot of imported blueberries, as you see, in the winter season, that we bring blueberries from all over the place. So the impact that this work done at the University of Florida by creating this new varietal type, it has huge impact nationally, but also internationally. So in this context, the University of Florida developed this new varietal type. They released the first cultivar in 1976. Also discovered and released the first crunchy or crispy type in 1997, and others later on. Also released, varieties that were able to create whole industry in different countries around the globe. Discover and release aromatic types, also with global impact. Release of cultivars with machine harvest capacity, and which is one of the biggest issues for the fruit industry, the lack of labor, of the increased cost of labor. And then I can tell you that currently, more than 70% of the global southern high bush cultivars, they link to our pedigree here at the University of Florida, and they link 1 or 2 generations, up to 3 generations removed only. So this is all very recently. The University of Florida has released more than 100 varieties in total, and as you see, it's a steady production of new varieties. Our focus is local, but our impact is global. How we do that, how we develop new varieties, we use in this what you can see here is the pedigree, or basically each of the lines, how the different selections connect, and the blue ones are different cultivars that have been developed. And this is the pedigree, basically, how the crosses are made to develop new varieties. The traditional methodology of crossing and selecting the best progeny is, as you see here, basically, you emasculate the flowers, and then you use pollen of the parental type that you want to use into the maternal flower, as is shown here by Dr. Paul Lyrine, which was instrumental in the creation of many of the varieties I just mentioned. After you obtain these plants, they are put in the field, as you see here. So this is a traditional methodology. And then they are evaluated for yield, quality, disease resistance, and all the other characteristics that we look at. And then we move forward to select the best one to be cultivars for the commercial industry. So as I showed before, the crosses are done, the plants are put in the field. So here I'm going to just show you how the selection process more or less happens, and how it has evolved through time with the use of different methodologies. So once the plants are in the field, we usually observe the characteristics, and then in the past, back to 2017, most of the evaluations were done visual for characteristics like yield, quality, and disease resistance. And then based on that, there was selection based on visual aspects. Then the plants were ranking depending on the visual aspect again of all these characteristics, and then crosses were made among the best ones for the different characteristics, and then this process goes again. Now, the use of visual evaluation, it has advantages and disadvantages. The advantages are that you can evaluate many characteristics simultaneously. The disadvantage is that it's not very accurate. However, after many generations of doing this, you usually end up releasing cultivars no matter what. And the other disadvantage of this process is it's very long. I mean, since the crosses are made originally, as you see here in year 0, it takes up to 15 years actually to commercialize the first variety out of those crosses. In our case, we do this every single year. So that's why we have a pipeline that I was showing you before, that we are able to release many cultivars over time. Now, has this been impactful? Oh, yes. It's slow, but it's been impactful. So here what you can see in this axis, in the y-axis, you can see the firmness of the fruit. In the x-axis, you can see the year of release of the different cultivars. So this is a review that we did to determine what was the impact of plant breeding in the firmness of the fruit. And we can see in red all the northern high bush, remember the ones that could not be grown in Florida. And then actually some of the original ones selected from the wild to be cultivars. And in blue, you can see the southern high bush, the ones that we work here, and how, around 1976, by the time that these were first released, and at the same time, some of the northern high bush, the ones from the north, they also increase significantly in the firmness of the fruit. And that has a huge impact because our consumers, the two characteristics that they look in the blueberries is flavor and firmness or texture of the fruit. Between 2017 and 2019, we changed the strategy for doing selection. And then I'm going to show you here. Even when the selection methodology might change, we still put the plants in the field and they still need to be evaluated in the traditional way. The only difference here is that the characteristics now were quantified, so measured basically. And then with those measurements, we were able to estimate the much better, with better accuracy, the different characteristics. We were estimate better, what portion of this variability that we observe is due to the genetics per se, or which one is due to the environmental conditions. Based on that, we can obtain what we call breeding values, and we use the breeding value prediction actually to determine which parents should be used for the next generation of crosses. And the process goes again. Now, the idea and the goal here is that this is going to provide us a faster way to release cultivars in this process. Another way to do selection of the plants is a method that nowadays we call genomic selection, that in reality is called genomic prediction. So we use genomic information or molecular marker information to determine what are the best individuals to use as parents, and to shorten it also the process of development of new cultivars. In this process, so similar as before, we have a field of plants. We also measure the different traits that we are interested, but simultaneously, we obtain molecular markers for every plant that we have in the field that we have evaluated. Using now the information of the characteristic that we measure, plus the genomic information, basically they are molecular markers across the whole genome, we use that to even more accurately determine, rank our parents, rank our populations, and determine which ones are the best ones to use as parents. They are going to pass these best characteristics to the next generation. The idea with this methodology is to accelerate even more the process of plant breeding and the process of developing new cultivars. So after saying that, I just cover a little bit of more or less how the plant breeding and the different ways more traditional ways, if we can say it. And the genomic selection is probably considered nowadays a more modern way to do plant breeding. So I just want to tell you a little bit what do we do. So we also, in the traits that we look at, that we're trying to improve, are the traditional traits that probably every breeding program tries to improve, which is yield, quality, and resistance to pest diseases. We also try to use and develop methodologies to accelerate the development of cultivars using genomic information, or these molecular marks that exist in the genome of every plant. We also try to adapt the development of new cultivars to new production systems, as I'm going to show you in a second. Try to develop cultivars for machine harvest to try to solve the problems of shortage of labor and increasing the cost of labor. And then we work very hard also in flavor and aroma of blueberries. And we continue working, like in 1950, we continue working heavily on the use of wild species in our program, because they provide variety of different new characteristics that they don't exist nowadays in the market. So just to show you a little bit what I'm talking about. So this is, for example, a new production system where the plants, instead of being in the open field, they are produced in these containers and under these high tunnels. And then we can obtain as to high times the yield in the first year compared with the open field. We continue working in machine harvest because the cost of machine harvest is significantly lower than domestic labor. So it's half of the domestic labor. And it's actually a lot more, it decreased significantly compared with imported labor. When I'm talking about imported labor, is this special temporary visa that are given to workers to come here and harvest the fruit. And we need to compete, with our neighboring countries that they have a much lower cost for labor. So back in 2017, we released the first cultivars. Actually, they can be machine harvest for fresh consumers. And it's being adopted as we speak. Another trait that we work significantly, as I mentioned before, is flavor and aroma. Flavor is a complex characteristic that is composed of two different parts. The first one is where your tongue is able to taste, which is traditional sugar acids, umami, salty, and I'm missing one that I don't remember right now. But also the volatile components. Whenever you eat the fruit, a lot of the volatile components go through the back of your mouth and they go to your sensors in your brain. And that actually, this combination offers the possibility to select for thousands or millions of combinations of different characteristics of flavors in blueberries. So we have made significant progress in this area. For example, we can predict which blueberry is going to be the most liked by our consumers. And this is all research that we have performed in our lab. Traditionally, up to probably a couple of years ago, most of the focus in blueberries has been in sugar and acid. But we were able to demonstrate that only 40% of the variability that we observe in flavors comes from sugar and acid. And most of the variability comes from these metabolites or volatile components that provide this myriad of different characteristics in blueberries. Another characteristic that it was started to study back in 2013, and then now we're putting a lot more effort, is the capacity to observe aromatic components in blueberries that we already shown that they are more accepted and more liked by our consumer. So we are working in releasing new varieties with this characteristic as well. And as I mentioned before, it's been very important for us the use of wild species, because thanks to wild species, we're able to develop the cultivars or the varieties that we have nowadays. So this is a different wild species as the ones that was used in the past. So this is Vaccinium elliottii, and this is how naturally you observe it in the field. Using traditional methodologies of plant breeding, we were able to duplicate the genome of this species, and then we already observe an increase in the fruit size. And then through hybridization, we can observe that by the backcross one, basically 3-4 generations after the first plant was selected from the wild, we were able to incorporate the characteristics of this wild species into the southern high bush, into the commercial one. What is this important? Because these wild species are able to offer us many agronomical and sensorial characteristics that we don't observe nowadays in the commercial production. So with that, and for us it's very important, blueberry came to be because in part of the healthy characteristics that offered to our consumers. And that's why we see a huge increase in consumption. So we just always have to say, stay healthy and eat blue. You can find more information about blueberries and how to grow blueberries in this publication that is in our webpage as well. And also you can find a lot more information about our program, our team, the research we do, and all the cultivars that we have released as a program, and also extension work through Doc's blog. This is our extension specialist in this webpage, which is blueberrybreeding.com. And also you can follow me on Twitter at bberrybreeding, where I post all the information and I've been talking about. So thanks to our sponsors and for you to listen, and I'll be very happy to answer questions if you have some.
Thanks, Patricio. That's really interesting stuff, and we'll definitely be following you on Twitter. We have a couple questions that have come in. The first one is, are consumers' tastes changing? And if so, how have you changed your breeding programs to adapt?
That's very, very interesting. You know, I was just before this meeting, I was discussing with some colleagues about this. Consumers change demographically. So different consumers in different parts of the globe wants different things. But one thing is common. Nobody wants, you know, bad texture in the fruit. Some people likes a little bit better, a little bit more acid or less acidity, depending on the demographic. But nobody wants Mili fruit, that's for sure. Now, here in the US again, it consumes most of the blueberries that are produced globally. And the consumer is very traditional because it's been eating blueberries since the beginning of the days. You know, most people harvesting the blueberries from the wild. So our consumers, I will say, they are more traditional and they are more used to the traditional flavors of blueberries. But if you see, for example, in the case of grapes, that you can now go to the grape aisle in the supermarket and you see all these novel flavors and all these novel shapes, and the consumers adapt. The consumer, when you offer something that it tastes good, and actually they have a good experience with this new product, they're gonna use it. They're gonna consume it.
Great, thank you. You mentioned acidity. Is there any work being done to grow blueberries in less acidic soil? That's something that people has been working. We are not working directly on that right now. So as we select what traits we work on, we usually select the traits that they are more impactful for our producers. So again, we carry a whole survey of every single producer that we can reach across the whole state. Based on that, we sort the challenges our producers have, and we direct our strategies for genetic improvement in our program. Acidity is not an issue because actually injecting acid, while the irrigation system, you need to have an irrigation system, but injecting of acid into the irrigation is not an expensive procedure for our producers. There is a lot more, challenge, higher priority challenge that our producers have than the acidity at this point. Okay. Have you seen changing environment conditions like climate impacting blueberries over the years, and is breeding being used to respond to that, and how?
Yes, that's right, and that's been very impactful actually. So if you imagine, I was showing you before the map for chilling hours. In the past, in this part of the state, we were able to obtain up to 300-400 chill hours. So that means in the winter time, we were able to observe 300 or 400 hours under 37 degrees Fahrenheit. Nowadays, that's been decreasing significantly, which affects the production of blueberries, basically the yield or productivity of blueberries. Now, in our case, I will say that we are better prepared than anybody in this sense because we grow blueberries all the way from central South Florida to North Carolina. So the selections that they have been performing in the central South or the most southern part of the production area are being able to adapt very well to the central part of the state. And if these trends continue, probably in the future we might be using them here in the north part of the state.
Thank you. Another question that just came in is about protecting IP. For example, is vegetative multiplication possible? Can you speak to that?
Yes, sure. So, me as the plant breeder and other 30 or so plant breeders here at the University of Florida, we work in the development of the varieties. Once these varieties are developed, there is a different office in the university that is in charge of the protection and the IP. So these varieties, and is the only sustainable way that we have to support breeding in public institutions is to license these varieties and being able to obtain royalties that they were used for continued genetic improvement that benefits our local producers.
Thank you. Another question that just came in, what are the production levels like for the southern high bush blueberries versus the northern wild blueberries?
Can you repeat that, please?
Yes. What are the production levels like for the southern high bush blueberries versus the northern wild blueberries?
Production levels was there? I'm not sure what do they mean by production. I mean, comparison of production, productivity, yield. I will not have an idea how to compare with, if we are talking about the northern high bush, the high bush that is commercially produced in the north part of the country, they usually yield more because the characteristics are better. While we are able to produce first and we produce good fruit quality, the reality is that Florida is a pretty harsh environment to grow almost anything. And that's why our varieties, once we develop the varieties under this condition, they work very well in other places. They don't have such harsh conditions, Imagine humidity, heat, all the diseases and pests that we are able to attract here to the state. So whatever survive here usually do much better in other places. Now, compared with the north, and just to give you an idea, the plantings here in the state, they don't last more than 10 to 12 years. While in the north, using the northern high bush, the plantings could be up to 50 years. So that's a huge impact. Why? Because the conditions are very harsh in the state. So, but those are the northern high bush that I'm talking about nowadays. Those are also genetically improved. They are not the wild ones anymore. So there also has been a lot of improvement in the northern varieties for use in commercial production by our north producers.
Thanks. I don't see any questions at this point, but I'll give it a minute in case anyone thinks of anything else. So I'll just ask you, what do you see as the biggest challenges facing blueberry production as you look out maybe in the next 5 years, 10 years? What are you working towards right now?
I think probably two things, as I mentioned before. Labor is a big issue for any produce, any fruit or vegetable that needs labor for commercial harvest or for any other activity. I see the major issue that I see for us is that the machines that we are using nowadays, they are not the best ones for what we need them to be. They are not to the standards that we need them to be. That's the issue. So we're still able to harvest. We can harvest our very best cultivars for those firmness characteristics. However, we need the technology, the machine robotic technology to improve. And that's something that we can now work on. So we can work in improving the plants, and then we have other people that works in improving machines. And that's what is needed nowadays in our case. The second one is flavor and aroma, is our capacity to select new flavors, novel flavors and aroma. And I believe they are going to be well accepted by your consumers.
Great, thank you. We did have another question come in. Can you tell us a little bit more about molecular breeding? What exactly is that and how is it being used in blueberries?
So molecular breeding, and that's one of the classes I teach here in the university, is composed of different things. Probably the traditional one that has been used up to now is the use of molecular markers to perform selection. Just to give you an analogy, sometimes you guys read in the newspaper that there is a new gene that is being found that is correlated, for example, with diabetes. Okay, so that means that if you have one variant of that gene, you potentially could have diabetes. So if you are in that category, you need to take care of more of yourself, right? So the same thing happens with plants. So we do a study to identify what genes are correlated with the different characteristics. And then in the process of selection, we use those molecular markers of the selection for those genes, right? To select the plants that we're going to be using for making crosses and the ones that we're going to be moving forward. That's the traditional way. And what we call marker-assisted selection. A new form of marker-assisted selection started in the 2000s when somebody proposed that no matter what the genes are associated with, if we can just use these molecular markers across all the genome to predict what is going to be the performance of the plants in the field, then in reality, we don't care about the specific function of the genes. We only want to predict. So that's what I was showing you before, is genomic selection. In that methodology, we are not changing anything in the genome of the plants. The only thing is that we are using all the genes simultaneously to create a prediction model to predict what is going to be the performance for the different traits that we're interested. And then we use those models and those rankings to select these plants for use as parents or to move them forward in the process. Another form of molecular breeding probably could be the use of transgenics, or the use of genome editing. But I think my colleague Fred Gameter is going to be talking more about that tomorrow.
Thank you. It was a really good explanation. And yes, I think that Fred will be covering that in a little more detail tomorrow. Another question is about pollinators. Are there different pollinators needed for the cultivars you create? And do you import pollinators?
So pollination and cross-pollination is very important in blueberry. It's actually needed. We don't recommend all producers to use cross-pollination. That means that you have to have more than one cultivar in the field at this point. There is not enough research to support that you need to plant a single block of cultivars. Even when it's done, we don't support that. And that's why we need the cross-pollination. The pollinators that we use traditionally are bees. Bees are not very efficient in the pollinations of blueberry, but still, or producers are the ones that, you have available actually for renting. So you can rent bees and put in your fields. And I believe there is enough here in the state for the production area that we have. I don't think that we import from other states, but I might be mistaken. I may not have managed all the information. The other pollinators that we have are native pollinators, and also bumblebees are way more efficient. One visit of bumblebees is equivalent to 5 or 6 visits of honeybees to the single flower, and that's what is needed more or less for the flower to produce a good blueberry. Lack of pollination affects yield and affects fruit quality, and also affects flavor and times of production. So pollination is very, very important, and we do a lot of work with our colleagues in entomology with pollination of blueberries.
Great, thank you. That's all the questions that I see for now. I really appreciate your time, Patricio. It's really interesting stuff.
Of course.
And if any of you think of questions that you didn't have a chance to ask, feel free to send those in, and we'll work with Patricio to get those answers back to you offline. But thanks again.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Good luck.
Great, thank you. We're going to switch gears now, and we're going to be hearing from the team at HM Klaus about breeding tomatoes for tomorrow. HM Klaus and our other companies have prepared video presentations, and then they'll join us live for Q&A following each segment. So presenting this morning from HM Klaus are Jason Burney, Product Manager, Fresh Market Tomato, Bernie Hamill, Technical Sales Representative, Johnny Parker, R&D Trail Specialist Global Coordinator, and Anthony Farandelli, Research Associate. I will hand it over to you.
Hi, my name's Jason Burney. I work as a Solanum product manager with the marketing group for HM Claws. We're filming here today from Davis, California, one of our head offices, where we also do a lot of research and development work, but also have offices for all the other parts of the business that we have. You'll see behind me one of the R&D blocks that we have for tomatoes that we're doing crossing blocks with for a lot of different markets in the world. So a pretty interesting place to be, even in the middle of winter. Thank you for joining us for this virtual event. We're glad to have you. Unfortunately, with this global pandemic that we're still seeing today, we've made some necessary arrangements to make sure we can deliver some news and information about tomatoes and the work that we do within that segment. Let me pass it to Bernie Hamill to give you more updates on where tomatoes have been in the past and perhaps where they're going to be in the future.
I'd like to welcome you to our beautiful research center down here in Immokalee, Florida, and try to give you some information about Florida and the fresh tomato program here at HM Close. Tomatoes were actually found for the first time in South America, and when they were transported to Europe, they were related to the nightshade, and so for a long time people thought they were poisonous and wouldn't eat tomatoes. And at some point in history, they were known to be, or thought to be, an aphrodisiac, and such they got the name love apple. We started producing winter tomatoes in Florida probably in the early 1900s because we found that we could produce fresh, high quality tomatoes in Florida in the winter time when everybody else in the United States was under snow.
Thanks, Bernie, for that interesting detail about the history of tomatoes for America. I'd like to take this opportunity to introduce Johnny Parker. He works in research and development out of Florida and helps assist breeders in determining which varieties move forward in our breeding program. He's here to talk to us about our station in Immokalee. So here's Johnny with some details about that.
I'm the global coordinator for the Research Trial Specialist team here at HM Claws. Our team helps to find new varieties, and that's kind of what I'll be talking about a little bit today. The HM Claws Research Station was put on some land that we leased years ago to create an on-farm model. This is something that previously we didn't have. We farm tomatoes, squash, hot peppers, bell peppers, corn, beans, pumpkins, okra, watermelons, melons. We do a little bit of everything here. It was opened, I believe, in 2003, and it encompasses about 50 acres. And we also recently acquired another piece of land in Felda, Florida, about 30 minutes north of our current research station, and it's kind of our overflow catch because we do quite a bit of research here, so it's nice to have that little bit of extra land.
Thanks, Johnny. My name's Anthony Farandelli. I'm a breeding research associate in Davis, California for HM Claws. When we're talking about tomato breeding, we're referring to using traditional breeding methods to improve traits in tomatoes. Some of these traits are things like yield, shelf life, color, flavor, and other important things for the consumers and growers. We do this by developing hundreds of varieties a year and trialing them in their target markets. This intensive trialing process can take up to 5 years from going from our initial trialing of R&D varieties to a fully commercial variety. I'll pass it over to Bernie to talk a little bit more about the specifics of some of these traits.
Yield is probably the most important component that you can have on a farm because how many boxes of tomatoes you can pick per acre determines how much you're going to get paid. Now, as we lose land, yield per acre becomes even more important because we're trying to feed millions more people on the same or less amount of land, which means that you're going to have to get more yield per acre, or people won't be able to enjoy the tomatoes we produce. Shelf life is a component as it moves through the value chain. As we produce firmer varieties, they'll be able to survive the rigors of going through the chain to get to the grocery store and have the shelf life that people need in order to have tomatoes that don't rot. When I started in this industry in the early 80s, Florida probably had a population of about 10 to 12 million. We just passed 21 million in the latest census. So that said, we also grow tomatoes on the warmest land that we can find, which usually is along the coasts, and that is also where people are settling when they move to the Sunshine State. As a result, we have to find ways to get more yield on the same amount or on less land. With the help of the universities and what we call the Green Revolution, we have probably about 33,000 acres of Florida, and we're producing the same or more amount of tomatoes that we did back when I started in this business in the 1980s. I think that is it says something very great about the growers in Florida, about us as an industry, and about us as seed companies. I think we can be very proud of that.
Thanks, Bernie, for that interesting information. So we consider yield as a trait, and it actually all starts here. What you'll see behind me is a crossing block, and you generally have a male and a female, both of which have desired traits for a given market. What actually happens here, we get a lot of help from our other colleagues. They come in and make crosses between the male and the female to give us what we have as a hybrid today. So with that given hybrid, we give that to people like Johnny Parker, who I mentioned before, who start looking at it at an R&D stage. Then once we start collecting data on yield and quality, how it stands up to bacteria, for example, in the humid weathers of Florida. Once they start ticking the boxes or passing the tests that we have internally, then it starts moving through more of a development stage. Then it goes to people like Bernie Hamill that are on the floor, and then they start showing their growers and their customers to see what they think of our new product. So in today's challenging market, resistances are a must-have. Otherwise, a grower won't have a variety that's viable for the field, and he won't have a product to sell at the end of the day. So let's pass it to Johnny Parker to give us more details on resistances in the marketplace.
Depending on the severity of the diseases and how bad the outbreak in a particular area is, it can severely affect the supply chain for tomatoes. There may be several people who remember years ago when you would go to a Wendy's or a Jack in the Box or anywhere you would get a fresh tomato on a sandwich, and they would charge you an extra 50 cents. And the reason for that is we had unprecedented issues with disease and issues with freezes. The diseases can affect global seed supply. Generally, it's not the same type of disease that affects it, because obviously you're harvesting the fruit for the seed and not for consumption. But if you get certain types of disease in your crop, it can affect the ability to sell that seed to customers, which means they can't plant the seed, which leads to a decrease in crop acreage, which in turn could lead to a supply chain issue. Also, depending on the disease you get, it could in fact cause the fruit not to ripen, and if it doesn't ripen, the seed doesn't mature. If the seed doesn't mature, we can't use it for the subsequent crop. We have a new saladette called Da Vinci, and a saladette is more of the elongated type tomato. Instead of a round, it's more elongated. Da Vinci has yellow leaf curl resistance, tomato yellow leaf curl resistance, Fusarium race 3 resistance, and nematode resistance. It has a great set. It has a crimson gene on one parent. It also is a very aggressive plant, and the size is very good up and down the plant. From what we're hearing from growers who are looking at the variety, the yield is very, very high. Then we have a round tomato, HM 8148, which has tomato yellow leaf curl resistance, Fusarium race 3 resistance, and Fusarium crown rot resistance. Again, brings a lot to the table, has the size that growers and producers and consumers are starting to request. It's got good flavor, good color, and high yield.
Thanks, Johnny. Great information. So in addition to these traits like yield and shelf life, at the end of the day, these tomatoes are going to end up on a consumer's plate. So we need to figure out ways that we can improve the quality of the tomato for these eating experiences. So something like flavor is really important for us, but it's a really big challenge to try and figure out how we might bring a better flavor to the tomato. One of the ways that we do this is through a consumer taste panel. We can take a lot of different varieties and put them out in front of people and have them tell us why they like it, why they don't like it, what parts they like, what parts they don't like. In addition to that, we can send the tomatoes to do in-house laboratory testing, where we're testing them for things like sugar, Brix levels, acidity, and trying and combining the information that we get from that and associating it with what the consumers like and don't like to try and study this flavor on a little bit bigger of a scale. In addition to flavor, color is really important. It's important visually for people to see a red tomato that they like. And one of the ways that we can do this is by following certain genes and bringing those genes in by using the traditional breeding methods. One of these genes is called crimson gene. Bringing it on, it's really interesting to study how this gene interacts in the tomato. You find that bringing it on one parent will give you a lighter red color, but bringing it in on both tomatoes will give you that really dark, vibrant red, beautiful color that consumers really like and want. In addition to just red colors, we're also looking at different colors. So we might have a darker tomato or even a different shape with a marmande shape. We have one of these that has been very successful in Europe called Adora that brings in a different fruit shape with a really dark purple color that consumers really like. We're looking to expand doing that globally. So I'll go back to Johnny and he can talk a little bit more about the importance of these things in the marketplace.
Over time, we've started seeing a change in consumer preference. It's no longer just, I want a red tomato. It's, I want a chocolate tomato with green shoulders, or I want a yellow tomato with high flavor, or I'd like an orange tomato with green stripes. There's becoming more and more consumer preference to flavor and appearance. There's a lot of people who will tell you that consumers buy with their eyes, and that's becoming very prevalent in the store shelves in today's marketplace. You're starting to see when you go into the supermarkets now, not only do you see the red round tomatoes and the saladette type tomatoes, you'll see Campari type tomatoes, which are the racquetball round type that we get out of greenhouses. You'll see colored tomatoes, you'll see different shaped tomatoes, different sized tomatoes. So tomatoes probably the most widely consumed vegetable in the world, and as such, I think what we're seeing is a shift to different appearances and different flavors and the diversity of the fruit. When people say flavor of the tomato, what they're actually referring to, whether they know it or not, is the sugars in the tomato, the acid in the tomato, the texture of the tomato, and the balance that brings to the table. Everybody's taste buds are a little bit different. Personally, I like a variety that has a little more acid with just a little hint of sugar. My children, on the other hand, they'd rather eat sugar cubes. They could care about the acid. So that's what we're working towards, is finding varieties that appeal to masses and not just a single bland tomato like we've had in the past. Back in 2006, H.M. Kloss released a variety called Scarlet Red. At the point in time that Scarlet Red was released, we had just basically orange type tomatoes that weren't really red. They really didn't have a lot of flavor. They really weren't that great to eat. Scarlet Red came out and it had a crimson gene, it had high flavor, it had the color, and so it kind of changed the game a little bit. And I would say from that point in time, you've seen H.M. Kloss and several other companies start to look at flavor profiles, look at color profiles, and they start bringing that to the table. And as I've mentioned, I think one of the things that H.M. Kloss is getting very good at, and something that you will see come from this company quite a bit in the future, is flavor. Flavor has become very important to the consumer, and as such, it's become very, very important to us. It was always here, but now it's become kind of the forefront of one of our breeding goals, is to have the high flavor, high color, good appearance tomatoes for the consumer.
Thanks, Johnny, for that detail. Here at HM Claws, we have a breeding program in Immokalee, as I mentioned previously. Now we have a lot of activity stretching from southern Florida all the way to New Jersey and New York. And within all those main growing regions, what we actually do is a lot of R&D development and product development, generally speaking, for the tomato industry. HM Claws is also today well known for our strong leadership in varieties today, specifically things like Red Juice and Red Morning that exist in many markets along the East Coast. We're well known for a variety called HM 1823 out of Florida. It's one of the market leaders as well. So behind that we have great varieties coming through, varieties called Da Vinci, HM 8148 for example. I'd like to take the opportunity to get Bernie to talk about more of them. And these for us are the tomatoes of tomorrow. So here's Bernie.
We're developing on our farm 2 varieties that I would love to call attention to because they have the things that we're looking for. And one of them is HM 8148, which is a new variety for the field tomato industry here in Florida. It has the disease resistant package that we need because of what I've previously talked about with respect to diseases coming into the state that we've never had before. 8148 has F3, TY, crown rot, nematode, and one of the parents is crimson, which will give us the interior color that we have been lacking in what we're looking for in Florida tomatoes. Another tomato, which I think is going to have a real big impact on the Roma tomato industry, is one we've called Da Vinci. Da Vinci is a very uniform plant. It has uniform and large size fruit up and down the plant, and it has really nice interior color. And again, it has the disease resistant package we're looking for in Florida.
Thanks, Bernie. Like I mentioned before, to develop a tomato variety is a multi-year process. So really the breeding process is to look for the tomato of the future. We do that by looking for ways to improve a lot of the traits we talked about: yield, shelf life, pest resistance, flavor, and fruit quality, or even a lot of different traits that might reduce grower input. For example, there might be a new pathogen that arises, and we'll look for a way that we can bring in a resistance to that to prevent a farmer from having to repeatedly spray pesticides on his crop. Although I can't give away too many secrets, HM Claws is reinvesting 18% of its revenue back into the research and development process, so you know that there's going to be a lot of exciting things coming from the tomato breeding process.
Thanks, Anthony. And that brings us to the end of our short video, and I really hope you enjoyed it. Here at HM Claws, I am really excited about the pipeline of material that's coming through to deliver to the East Coast markets, to really look at delivering varieties with improved colour, improved taste, but also work really well for the growers as well, with improved disease resistances that is much needed for the market today. So we're going to move on to our live Q&A session now, where HM Claws employees, we're going to be there to help answer some of your questions you might have. So thanks again for joining, and I look forward to the tomato of tomorrow.
Jason and Anthony will be joined by Matt Thomas, Vice President of Sales, USA and Canada, and Mark Nereus, Communications Manager. Welcome. Hi. We have lots of questions coming in, so I hope you're ready. I'll just go down the list. Our first question is similar to one from the previous session. How has climate change impacted tomato breeding efforts?
Thanks, Bethany. Anthony, did you want to help answer that one?
Yeah, so there's a lot of different things that can happen as a result of climate change. So one of the issues might be just unpredictable weather patterns. You have heat spikes, rain events, and so one of the ways you can deal with that is just by ensuring that you have varieties that can withstand some of those things. So for example, heat set, it's really important for when the flowers first set the fruits. And so you can try and find varieties that have the capacity to withstand those hot periods, so that they can actually set fruit. And on top of that, it's really just going back to that trialing network and making sure that the varieties that you have are very adaptable and that they can withstand a wide range of environments, and pretty much deal with anything that could happen as a result of these climate fluctuations and increasing temperatures.
Thank you. Our next question, you talked a lot about flavor, and I know it's going to be unique for everyone, but what are some of those new trends that consumers are asking for? What seems to be resonating? What's most requested and maybe disliked?
It's an interesting question. You're right, Bethany. I think it kind of varies with age group and the typology or the type of the tomato that you see on the shelf. If you look at cherry tomatoes, grape tomatoes, or as we spoke about, a particular color, and you pay generally a higher price or a premium for those sorts of products, you expect a really bright, vibrant color and quite a sweet tomato, because generally they're for fresh market sort of consumption in your salads. So we really see the need to develop sweet, high flavor, high sugar type varieties for the cherries and grapes. But then you look at sort of your standard sort of beef tomato or Roma tomato that you see on the shelf that sometimes is used for the processing market. And in the past, we haven't, or the market really hasn't asked for specific tasting tomatoes for that, because they're sort of sliced up and sent to Wendy's and burger chains and things like that. But these days, in the past couple of years, growers and the markets are trying to differentiate themselves with, again, high quality products. So when you look at determinate beefs, we're trying to develop sort of sweeter, more color, high color tomatoes for that kind of segment as well. So really depends on sort of the segment and the type that you're looking at.
Thank you. And so obviously taste is a key characteristic that you're looking for. But in your breeding programs, I know there are a lot of characteristics that you're looking for that have to come into play. So how do you determine which tomatoes move forward?
Yeah, I can make a start, and then maybe Anthony might be able to add on a couple of things. So somebody like myself and Anthony in a given season, together with the breeder, might end up going through maybe 100, 150 new hybrids at the R&D stage. And then, as we mentioned, we have a critical list of traits that are kind of needed for any given market. So we go through and evaluate them. Specifically, yield is a very critical trait for us. It's very important for the grower and for us as well. And then TSWV, TY, which we also mentioned. And then that gets narrowed down to maybe a top 20, top 25 based on those critical criteria that kind of pass the mark. And then slowly we vet these varieties in the given markets, in the markets we breed in, and then come down to maybe a top 5. And then that top 5 become 1 to 2 varieties that seem to fit really, really well in the market and continue to perform on a consistent basis. And that's how we sort of go through this process of selecting and developing a variety, which can take anywhere up to sort of 5 years to get a variety to the market. Did you want to add anything onto that, Anthony?
No, I think you captured it. Just really, the varieties that we're selecting to advance in our breeding programs are something that are bringing something new to the table. So it's an improvement over what is commercially available, and just thinking about something that will be commercially successful in the future needs to bring some sort of improvement. So it could be yield, fruit quality, plant health, disease resistance. But yeah.
Thanks so much. As you look ahead to the future, what do you see as those major challenges on the horizon, and how are you working now to meet those and meet demand?
Matt, did you want to maybe start the comments there on that one?
Sure. Thanks, Jason, and thanks, Bethany. The big challenge that we're facing right now is certainly disease resistance and the necessity to stack traits on top of one another. As climate change affects us, we don't have a specific climate change breeding program, but everything we do is addressing those growers' needs. And as climate changes, as the gentleman from University of Florida talked about, some of the varieties that work in the southern part of the state are moving up to the central and the northern part. It's the same with all vegetables. So really staying ahead of the issues that the growers may be facing is really our biggest challenges, is to stay ahead of if a chemical is restricted in a certain area, do we have the right genetics to continue to meet those growers' needs if they can't use their traditional inputs? So really the biggest challenge is staying ahead of the curve and anticipating what may come in the future.
Yeah. Thank you. You mentioned viruses. One of the other questions is, have you experienced any problem with tomato brown rugose fruit virus?
It's a good question. We certainly have. It's impacted probably every seed company globally. The biggest impact it's had on us is global seed movements, I'd say, and the additional regulations that most countries and most governments have put in place to allow for, I guess, for us to be more vigilant in seed testing and to be able to test our seed and move it around the country. And as a result, it's more investment for us, and it's a longer process to, again, move R&D seed around, but also commercial seed as well. It also, I guess, gets us thinking about, well, what's our breeding activity for something new like this? So again, it's another sort of roadblock, but also an opportunity and a challenge for us to look at new ways of innovation in bringing new resistances into some of our varieties. So, but for sure, it's been a problem, and I think it's going to continue to be an issue for us, globally speaking, not just for the US, but for everybody.
Thank you. Thanks. Does the local farmer market trend de-emphasize to some extent the need to make a tomato transportable? It's a good question.
Is that question maybe related to field holding and shelf life, perhaps? I'd say.
Jason, I'll jump in on that one.
Yeah,
so
sure.
Certainly the trend has been to have locally produced produce, vegetables. You know, there's definitely a push to eat local. We have many restaurants around the country that are farm to fork. Now, that's great, right? It grows our industry. It opens people's minds to trying more vegetables and having fresh veggies. That said, and we are seeing an increase in that market. However, I live in Madison, Wisconsin right now. It's the farmers market capital of the world. However, our high today won't even get out of the single digits. So yes, there's certainly a big push for farm to fork and for farmers markets and for your home gardeners. But there's a big portion of the country that can't grow year round. So we'll always have a need to have a tomato that's transportable, because there will not be a day when any of us on these calls will be satisfied to walk in the grocery store and not have a medley of tomatoes to choose from.
Definitely. Thank you. What are the breeding challenges to make store-bought tomatoes as good as homegrown tomatoes?
Anthony, do you want to comment on that one?
Yeah, it's certainly a challenge. I grew up in California and had a lot of homegrown tomatoes growing up, and it's pretty clear the difference between those tomatoes and the ones you can find in a grocery store. And this has a little bit of overlap with this question about the emphasis to have local farms. So on one hand, if you're producing a tomato that needs to be transported a long time, it can't be picked at the peak of maturity. And really, one of the industry standards has been to harvest them when they're at a mature green stage and treat them with a plant hormone ethylene to allow them to mature. And that really just doesn't allow the same levels of sugars and acids to develop as a tomato that you can go and pick 5 minutes before you're eating it. So one of the ways that this is the market trend is showing is that there are more tomatoes that are being ripened on the vine, and that we can breed to have tomatoes that work within those systems. And really, it's just a combination of these supply chains and increasing sophistication of the supply chain going from the farm to a distributor that can get them in grocery stores. And as they can do that in faster and more efficient ways, then you can reduce the time it takes to go from a farm to a grocery store. And really doing things like that, breeding within those systems, emphasizing the consumer traits, can really help to narrow the gap between something that you can grow out in your garden and something that you can buy in a grocery store.
Great, thank you. I don't see any other questions right now. So as people are maybe thinking of some additional questions, I'll ask a question. How has COVID impacted your operations?
Good question. I can probably start on that in terms of being a product manager. We're often asked to visit our main markets and understand kind of the pipeline and the research activity. And I've been working from home for the past 12 months here in California as well. And unfortunately, I haven't been to Florida, for example, where I'd usually visit that particular area for solanum, for sweet pepper and tomato, probably 3 to 5 times a year, I guess. So, there's that level of impact where travel for us has restricted quite significantly in terms of visiting our main markets and looking at new varieties and things like that. Activities around our main stations have still been stable, and we've been operating just with a high level of caution, I guess, and having the ideal and correct safety procedures in place to make sure that we have our temperatures checked and we wear the appropriate face masks and things like that. So in terms of operations, our global nature as a seed business has slowed up, I guess, but we have still managed to continue sort of normal day-to-day business as well. But maybe from a sales perspective, Matt, do you have some comments as well?
Sure, thanks, Jason. Fortunately, the way that we're set up in the U.S. and in most areas of the world, we have regional teams. So, for example, in the Southeast, we have a large presence in the Southeast and a large team stretching from South Florida up through the Carolinas. As Jason mentioned, he hasn't been able to come and visit California. So there has been more collaboration and work with the different groups where whether a breeder can come or can't come, or Jason isn't able to travel down, our local teams are really picking up that type of activity, and we're continuing to move the products through the pipeline. And that's in terms of our individual, how it's impacted us. It certainly impacted our sales in terms of the connection with our customers. We're not really going into their offices anymore. We are having meetings out in the field with the proper distance and face coverings. So there's no doubt that it has changed our daily life. However, I couldn't be more proud of the organization and our team for pivoting and making the sales continue to happen and meeting the needs of the growers. And I would say it's not just us that's making this happen, it's the whole industry as an essential industry, whether it's HM Klaus or one of our formidable competitors. As an industry, we're really keeping it going and working together to provide food sustainability for not just the U.S., but globally.
Great, thank you. Okay, I have another question that came in. What about the passion for heirlooms? How do you promote hybrids?
Yeah, there's a couple of questions there. When it comes to heirlooms versus hybrids, they're very, very different products, obviously. I mean, heirlooms carry some very interesting colors and flavors and textures, but they don't have the hybrid vigor and the traits necessary to meet the demands of such a huge population in the US, but globally speaking, but also in some of the environments that a lot of these crops are grown in, especially in open field environments. So that's probably the biggest difference between heirlooms and hybrids. How do we promote them? It's through our teams on the floor that we have, as Matt mentioned. We have sales, PD guys, and girls on the floor doing the PD work, but also connecting with the growers on a day-to-day basis. And and also connecting with sometimes downstream marketing operations as well, just to get their feedback and a better understanding of where our products fit in the market. We also have people like Mark that's on the call, part of the communications department that we have, that help do the brochures and the flyers and the promotional content for a lot of our new launches, and help get together this sort of detail for ASTA as well. I mean, without those people in our team, we wouldn't have the opportunity to reach out to a much larger audience for our products. So that's generally how we sort of get on the floor and tell people about our new hybrids.
Thank you. Okay, another question. As more countries are putting restrictions on biotechnology, how are you talking to consumers about plant breeding innovation?
Matt, did you want to comment on that one?
Sure. Thanks, Jason. And then and Anthony, if there's anything that I leave out, please feel free to chime in. In terms of the message to consumers, though biotechnology certainly is restricted in many areas of the world, that said, it really hasn't penetrated into vegetables. The cost versus value on field crops for biotechnology is there. And I give an example of field corn versus sweet corn. There's 100 million acres of field corn in the United States, plus or minus. I'm sure it's changed a little bit since I was in that world. To compare to 1 million acres of sweet corn. So sweet corn is one of those crops where it could be a natural transition from traditional breeding to biotech. But the consumer, so first the cost versus benefit isn't there because we don't have the acres, we don't have the volume. And secondly, and most importantly, the consumer acceptance isn't there. They're not comfortable eating a fresh vegetable or fruit that has been bred with biotechnology.
Okay.
Yeah, just to add on to what Matt was saying, biotechnology is a pretty wide term. So there's certain biotechnologies that we could use, which is just seeing what's inside, what genes are already in the tomato, and these are genes that are coming from a natural backgrounds, and it's really just reading and seeing what's there. And then there's other types of biotechnology that are, what are referred to as GMOs, where you're actually going in and introducing a foreign piece of DNA into the genes, into the genome of the tomato to have some sort of effect. And what we're doing now in all of our commercial varieties is just traditional crossbreeding methods. So we're not introducing foreign DNA through laboratory techniques or doing any sort of genome editing right now. And we found that, all of the traditionally available methods at this point are sufficient to create progress in the tomato.
Okay, well, thanks everyone. Excellent questions, and we appreciate all of the comments. If you didn't have a chance to ask a question, or if you think of something later, again, you can email those to me or put them in the chat, and we will connect you with our speakers afterwards. But I want to thank all of you from HM Class for participating today and for the great discussion.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Bethany.
Thanks for the opportunity.
Thanks. Next up, we're going to hear from BASF Vegetable Seeds to provide insight on breeding for balance in consumer experience and agronomic performance. Joining us this morning, we have Sam Bush, Head of Sales Region Americas, Matt Dussault, Consumer and Customer Chemistry Manager, and Evan Ogundawan with the R&D Crop Technical Lead, Cucurbits. So Sam, Matt, Evan, it's all yours.
Welcome to BASF. My name is Sam Bush. It's our pleasure to be part of the ASTA Media Tour, where we'll be discussing breeding for balance. I will be joined today by two colleagues, Matt and Evan. Matt is our Consumer and Customer Chemistry Manager, and Evan, our R&D Technical Lead. Our discussion today. We are focused on becoming the preferred partner along the vegetable value chain through customer centricity, crop specialization, and consumer orientation. We're a company that combines market, product, and consumer insights with in-house expertise in R&D to develop well-performing varieties and to collaborate with partners along the value chain in order to offer vegetable solutions that make healthy eating enjoyable and sustainable. Why is that our motivation? With our Nuna's brand, BASF is one of the world's largest vegetable seed companies. We offer 1,200 vegetable varieties in 24 different crops, as well as unrivaled specialist advice. All around the world, more than 500 million consumers can daily enjoy vegetables grown from our seeds. To give some context to that number, that's more than the US population of around 330 million people. We are committed to contributing to the healthiness of the global diet. And this starts by understanding what consumers, what we all expect from vegetables. BASF's vegetable seed business is able to provide solutions for the world and to introduce new concepts. To know what kind of vegetables consumers want to eat, we research and monitor the market to identify the future market needs, customer needs, and consumer desires. This is the start for us to develop and provide to the market the best solutions. We understand that people want products that are good for the planet. They want products that have superior experience. They want them to be healthy and they want them to be convenient. Although our vegetable seeds are targeted at the beginning of the value chain, we share the same end user with every company in the vegetable value chain. Vegetable consumers are very important to us. We see demand increasing. We acknowledge that they seek an easy and enjoyable experience when it comes to fruit and vegetables. At the same time, we notice that they are increasingly valuing their health and sustainability. That's why we want to continuously improve the consumer experience of our vegetables with an emphasis on enjoyable flavor and convenience. And we will achieve this by the following: developing a deeper understanding of consumer preferences, a better understanding of how flavor and convenience are impacted throughout the value chain, and exploring innovative concepts with partners on how to deliver an improved experience to the consumer. So what does this all mean for melons? In the US, melon consumption has been steadily decreasing since 2011. The total category value has been decreasing at over 1.7% per year, with cantaloupes in particular decreasing at 2.5% year on year. Honeydews, however, we see growing at 2.3% year on year. But overall, melon consumption is declining at 1.7% per year. In a recent study in the US, melon consumers identified the top melon attributes. Here, I would like to pass to Eben so that he can talk about the insights like these and how we integrate these into the R&D community for innovation.
Yeah, thank you, Sam. Innovative breeding is our solution to consumer needs. Once we know what the consumer expects, then we start to work in research and development. Our R&D division combines expert botanical knowledge with cutting-edge technology and solutions. From molecular breeding to automated processes, our dedication to innovation enables us to create and provide the best performing solution in the market. With our expertise and R&D technologies, we are able to develop varieties faster and better traits for our customers. So the applied technologies include, but it's not limited to, close growing systems to perform high quality seed to seed cycles regardless of season, digitalization to ensure that nobody knows our genetics better than we do, and integrated breeding approach to ensure that our technologies are applied in the best and fastest way possible. Using these methods, we have not only produced solutions for our customers, but also do it with speed. For example, we were first in the market with varieties that meet new challenges, such as our resistance to the New Delhi virus in melon. Some other innovative examples will be shared with you today in this session. Finally, we focus on fostering powerful collaborations to strengthen our own capabilities and benefit from innovation opportunities globally. Agriculture is all about balance. Life itself is all about balance. The natural balance that powers the seasons, the climate, the crop cycles, the balance that is crucial to everyone's existence. Innovative breeding, this is our business excellence and is in our DNA for more than 100 years. That brings us to create well-performing consumer-oriented variety solutions. By working together with partners along the vegetable value chain, that is growers, processors, plant raisers, dealers, traders, retailers, and food service industry, we contribute to new vegetable concepts for the market, tailored to consumer needs and trends. Our products and advisory services create value to partners across the value chain. That value can be about establishing yield, protecting yield, processing qualities, and consumer value. For instance, we research and develop solutions around protection against viral diseases, transportability and taste, and climate change, that is heat and drought tolerance. We have a diverse of highly trained experts covering all relevant R&D functions. As many of our crops, melon is a global crop, and each melon breeding team is supported by scientists and researchers, including trait development, phytopathology, molecular breeding, data science and technology, and quality consumer and nutritional analytics. There is a dedicated team of researchers that also provide high throughput services to breeders and production on established technologies. These are a group of experts that are excited every morning, waking up and going to work in order to overcome challenges that our consumers and our customers face every single day. Development of consumer traits in R&D requires intense collaboration with marketing and accessing external expertise. We have strong collaboration culture in BASF vegetable seeds. We participate in consortia projects involving public institutions and other seed companies. But more importantly, we are proactive in seeking bilateral research collaborations with world-class researchers in universities and companies to gain consumer insight and fully understand consumer needs. Close interaction with these external partners help us to quickly jump on relevant leads and respond rapidly to consumer needs. In addition, we are able to leverage expertise in BASF Corporation for our business. An example is the BASF Metabolome Solutions in Germany, with whom our own vegetable seed food biochemistry experts in quality consumer and nutritional analytics collaborate closely on output traits. We explore advances in taste prediction and sensory testing of our products to ensure that the set out objectives are met before launching those products, and that is of making healthy eating enjoyable and sustainable. Now, my colleague Matt Desalt will show you some of those examples in melon.
Thank you, Eben. Over the past 10 years, Nunam's vision has been to identify opportunities to deliver a positive consumer experience through branding. We've witnessed this firsthand with crops like apples, citrus, stone fruit, and grapes, and we quickly followed this trend in the market with our melon portfolio. We decided to take a data-driven approach using consumer behavior and preferences to lead our decisions. For that, we invested heavily in conducting consumer research to examine all aspects of the consumer experience, from sight to smell and flavor, and how it's perceived, to understand which traits are valuable and which ones are not for consumers. So that when we go back to Evan with insights on traits we want to focus on developing for melon, we use the data from consumers to drive our breeding investments. We have several examples of how we've used feedback from our consumer research to deliver and execute concepts to the market that I would like to present to you today. Our most famous example of bringing consumer-focused genetics to market is Sweet Spark Cantaloupe. Sweet Spark is a unique project demonstrating what is possible when the supply chain collaborates on tackling problems together and highlights the value it can bring to the overall market. We started working together with a clear and concise mandate from retail. Help us fix our winter cantaloupe program. In general, there are quality consistency issues resulting in poor flavor, causing consumers to avoid cantaloupes altogether once the summer season ends. This is made more challenging because of weather and long transport to the United States. In response, we spent considerable time and resources to identify exactly what consumers want in both sugar and flavor compounds. In addition, we spent considerable time looking at varieties and evaluating their performance with a focus on Central American production. After testing multiple cantaloupe varieties, we identified and commercialized a variety that was consistently delicious and, most importantly, unique in its flavor profile. This variety, named Sweet Spark, is a variety with consistent sugar, firmness, but most importantly, consistent flavor. The flavor profile allows it to eat well, even in adverse conditions affecting its sugar content. Identifying these attributes and this response with consumers during tasting allowed the retailer to deliver the variety in their own label and feel confident offering the variety to consumers in the winter months. We continue to work with customers to identify and highlight opportunities with our melon portfolio in hopes of finding the next great cantaloupe for consumers. The Hello Melon is another exciting product in our portfolio. The Hello Melon has a thin yellow rind, white flesh, and a crispy texture like an Asian pear. For this concept, we partnered with another retailer to introduce this to the United States market. While cantaloupes are the largest consumed SKU in the category, not all consumers like cantaloupes. There are consumers who shy away from a number of cantaloupe attributes, but namely its musky scent or flavor. BASF's aim with Hello Melon was to step out of the cantaloupe segment and create a different concept for consumers. We received a significant amount of feedback from growers and retailers about yellow skin melons and their desire to try something new in this segment. While the yellow skin melon category has been growing, many of the yellow melon varieties in the segment exhibit variable quality and consistency. Inspired by successful branding campaigns in other crops like apples and citrus, we aim to create a young, energetic brand with a bright, trendy color palette and emoji in the tagline. Our tagline is sweet, crisp, and a smiling emoji. We were looking to appeal to a younger generation of millennials and those young families to create a healthy option that can be consumed in a myriad of occasions, whether as part of a breakfast plate, after-meal dessert, or snack. We created and supported a marketing campaign which included support to retail via consumer point-of-sale material showcasing the attributes of the melon. In addition, we also sampled the melon at retail and had a social media campaign. With a brand manual, we focused on maintaining consistency in product quality, packing, and labeling to help consumers recognize Hello Melon in the market. While we've learned a lot over the past 3 years, ultimately, we decided on launching the product seasonally and focus on bringing the melon to market at the most optimal time for consumers. We are continuing to fine-tune our offer in 2021 to deliver this delicious melon to even more consumers across the NAFTA region. BASF has a strong pipeline of melon genetics across multiple segments. This pipeline has allowed BASF to develop relationships with the supply chain to collaborate and launch new items nearly every year or every other year. This year is no different with the launch of our Sun Peak melon in the summer of 2021. We are happy to have Sun Peak introduced into our line of commercial products. It will be the most premium sutured style cantaloupe in the market. It is special because it has a harvest indicator, which is its shell that turns from green to gold when ripe. The flavor is sweet with caramel notes, and it has a sharp, brightly colored magenta flesh. It also has a long shelf life and can endure in the supply chain, making it an interesting proposition for consumers ordering online or receiving delivery. In the past few years, we've received reports from retail partners and consumers that the sutured cantaloupe segment is needing a refresh. BASF identified opportunities in the sutured melon market segment where a premium consumer experience was desired. As a result, we spent several years bringing this concept to market through our research and trials. With the Sun Peak Melon, we are again bringing a brand aligned with fulfilling our mission of delivering high-quality genetics to consumers. With our Nunum's brand, BASF offers more than vegetable seeds. We offer partnerships and consumer-oriented solutions for the entire vegetable chain, including growers, processors, plant raisers, dealers, traders, retailers, and the food service industry, all tailored to consumer needs and trends. Our vegetable solutions are truly vegetables people love because we meet and exceed the wishes and expectations of the consumer. We achieve this by creating improved varieties using the most modern breeding methods and working closely with partners throughout the vegetable chain. We proactively contribute to higher and enriched vegetable consumption through innovations that are healthy, attractive, and sustainable. Thank you for listening to us today. We appreciate your time and look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Sam, Matt, and Evan. Really interesting. I'm going to have you up here for questions. We have a few that have come in. Welcome. That Sun Peak melon looks really good. So I'm wondering what's next? What what challenges are you solving for now, or what do you see that consumers are looking for in the future?
I'll take that one, I guess. Yeah, so I think what we're working on now is really, we're working on a lot of things, but I think that what we're really focused is on further improvements to flavor. I see, based off of our research that we've done, and I don't think it comes to any surprise that flavor is number one in preference. Flavor improvements, and we continue to work on flavor to improve it, both learning from the consumer and then taking those learnings back to make those incremental improvements. And that means, again, whether that's sweeter melons or more consistent, I think those are two separate things, and we continue to tackle those problems and with our team.
Thanks. So taking it back a step, can you tell us more about the history of melon breeding? Kind of how did it start, and have they always been like what we see at the stores? I mean, I think that we're seeing that they haven't been, but what have been some of those major improvements along the years?
Yeah, I can take that. Thank you, Bethany, for that question. As mentioned in our presentation, our company has existed for over 100 years. We've been in business of melon for more than three decades, if I'm not mistaken. The breeding is about 2 decades that we've been working on breeding in melon specifically. But that does not mean that breeding just started for melon globally. So like other crops, there has been breeding activities in melon for many years. So what has changed? So technology has advanced since we started. Today we are able to deploy those research functions and programs and technologies that I mentioned some of them in the presentation in helping advance the breeding activities in melon. That includes advancements in molecular breeding with molecular markers. That includes understanding of the basic compounds that influence nutrition or flavor or other fruit qualities. Also advancement in understanding the abiotic and biotic stresses that melon face with our phytopathology team, agronomists, and quickly responding to that, using the power of technology. So that's what has changed. I hope that answers your question.
Great. No, it's a great answer. Thank you. Similar question that has come in for the others. Have you seen challenges as a result of climate change, and how are you working to solve for that?
Yeah, I can try to take that as well. I just mentioned a couple of seconds ago that there are biotic and abiotic stresses that challenge all crops, so melon not excluded. So what we do is to make sure that our customers are well taken care of. And then Matt did a good job by mentioning what those customers entail. We talked about the growers, we talked about retailers, and the king among them is the consumers, right? So what we do, if a grower cannot produce profitably, consumers cannot have their product. So disease resistances, stresses from environmental changes are part of what we work on to make sure that our crops are adapted to the production areas. And then that not only that, when they are harvested, from the point of harvest to the point of sale, post-harvest handling, that our products are able to withstand those. So that's what we do. We break down the components of those complex traits and try to attack them one by one. It's a continuous process. It's never ending, and it's challenging, and that's what makes us happy.
Yeah. There's always something new, right? There's always new challenges on the horizon. So, thank you. And speaking of, what are some of those diseases and viruses that are the big challenges for you right now?
Well, they keep evolving. As you know, we just talked about New Delhi virus. That became a big problem in the melon industry. And I'm proud to say that we are the company that first introduced a new product in the market that provide resistance to that virus, just because of the expertise that we have in-house, the connection that we have with our customers. So that's what we are very, very proud of. So there are several diseases that we continue to work on, whether that be viruses, bacteria, or even fungi.
Thank you. I don't see any other questions right now. So as people are thinking of them and typing them in the chat box, I'll ask you a similar question as I asked before. How has COVID impacted your operations?
I think my colleagues can chip in. I will take a quick answer to that. One thing that COVID has shown us is the power of our collaboration, and flexibility. Of course, most of our people are shut in, working from home. But somebody who is like office worker is volunteering to help in the field, making sure that we do social distancing. We will not say that we have not been impacted, but I would rather talk about the beauty that this COVID-19 has brought out in our humanity and our passion for the business of making sure that customers are well taken care of. So, as a person, personally, I'm really proud to be part of BASF Vegetable Seeds, particularly in this pandemic. It brought out the best in us. Yeah.
Thanks, Evan.
And
anyone else want to add?
Yeah, Bethany, maybe I can add a little bit as well to that. I think it's changed the way we've interacted with our customers very much this year. So a lot of different tools that we've been using and that customers have been using, I think, and it's been one of the real positives. I think if you look at the way we use digital tools to communicate and to share information both internally and with our customers, I think this has been one of the things that's forced us to move faster in that area, and the results that we see are really, really nice in terms of interaction, in terms of understanding customer needs even better, and having that connection remaining, even though we can't sometimes be where we would like to be physically.
Thanks. Really good points. You mentioned digital tools, so that brings me to another point, and not just for melons, but on all of the crops that you're working on. How do you see, can you expand a little bit on some of these new digital tools that you have access to, and breeding techniques and innovation, and what you're most excited for, and what that will mean to the future of seed?
Yeah, digitalization is the future, so we all know that. And COVID-19 has underscored that in a big way. So we are at the forefront of making sure that we take advantage of all the development in the digital world. So yeah, there are many facets of digitalization. So whether that be working in the field, making sure that data are not collected on field notebooks anymore. We have devices that we use in taking those data, and then making sure those data are well stored and they are well analyzed, and then the analysis is done on a timely fashion to make sure that decision of the result of those analyses are taken at record time to move on in the breeding process. Up to the office workers using the digital world to further improve the efficiency of our work. So all I will tell you is that we are not oblivious of the fact that that's the future, and we do the best we can to make sure we take advantage of the advances in different facets of digitalization. All in all, to make sure that we are able to respond, not only respond, but respond in good time to the needs of our customers, because that's the main point that I would like to for us to get here. That look, our company work to make sure that the challenges that our customers face are met, and that we respond as quickly as possible to make healthy eating enjoyable and sustainable.
Great, thank you. That's a good bridge to our next question. We had a couple of people asking about sustainability, and I know you spoke to climate change briefly before, but how is plant breeding working to be more sustainable? What about water resources, shelf life? Can you speak to any of those advancements?
Yeah, I may do that. I just told you our main goal is to make healthy eating enjoyable and sustainable. Sustainability part, relating to shelf life specifically, connects melon in a special way. So we do have long shelf life melon. The reason for that is that when you take a melon from the point of harvest and then you get it to the grocery store, sometimes those melons look ugly. You have blemishes and they deteriorate very fast. And then we want to make sure that, by the time the melon gets to the shelf in the grocery store, that they still retain the quality that the consumer wants. Not only looking good, but when the consumer gets it home, that they are not disappointed in what they are tasting. Of course, there is negative correlation between long shelf life and good tasting experience. Yeah, and that is the beauty of breeding, so of research, of what my colleagues that are with me today, what we do, Sam and Matt, with my team in breeding and in research, to make sure that we find a balance between eating quality and long shelf life, so that there's less waste. So when we talk about sustainability, we want less waste. We want to actually eliminate waste. So that's what we are all about. And then these traits are complex. So like I mentioned earlier, so we have expertise that break these complex traits down into their components, and then we figure out how to bring those together in a package, in a product that Matt gives a couple of examples earlier on. Yeah.
Thank you. Great answer. So we talked about sustainability and taste. We have another question about nutrition. How are your breeding programs working towards improving nutrition with certain varieties?
Another great question. So we all know that vegetables are healthy. So it's our passion to make sure that all that you are hearing me, you eat more vegetables, regardless. Melon especially. So why is melon so important? We know that all vegetables have antioxidants that fight against cancer and have good heart-friendly components. So what do we do? What we do have, I mentioned earlier, we do have a team of researchers called Quality, Consumer, and Nutritional Analytics. So this group of researchers are what we can simplify as food biochemists. So they work closely with marketing and sales, Sam's team, Matt's team, and consumer insight people in our organization to understand, okay, what are the components of nutrition and how do we make sure that our lines, what I mean by lines, for those that may not know, these are individual genetics in our breeding pipeline. How do we make sure that they do have the higher level of those nutritional components in our selection, so that the product that we are selling doesn't just look good, doesn't just taste good, but has the higher level of components of nutrition. So we do that. We do have expertise. What we don't have in-house, we collaborate with people outside, as I mentioned in one of my slides. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Going back to COVID, can you talk a little bit more specifically about how it has impacted your production this year, especially in terms of labor?
Sam or Matt?
Yeah, Bethany, just to clarify the question here, you're talking about melon production or our seed production?
It says breeding programs and production. So I would imagine maybe not just specifically for melons.
How has COVID impacted that?
Yeah, the breeding programs and your production, and also, are there any labor issues that have resulted?
Oh, well, I said when we were talking about COVID and the impact and the beauty that I saw in our team, so there was a point during that the peak of the pandemic where we had to actually face or how will I say have like a roster of the number of people that can go to work. So we had people that are like office workers going to help out breeders in planting some of our fields, So that's what I was saying. So we were going to be short-handed in the breeding program because of the personnel we have, but people from marketing and sales, from even support staff, production, they stepped in several cases to help us out so that there's no gap, Yeah, that's what we see in the organization. I don't know whether that answers your question or not. Yeah.
No, I think that's helpful. Does anyone have any more questions on that or other issues? I don't see any more hanging out in the chat box here. Okay, well, again, if you think of any other questions, please send them in and we can work with the team to get you back responses afterwards. But I want to thank our friends at BASF for all of your insight and the interesting presentations and good discussion. Thank you for joining us, and we'll head on to our next part of the program.
Thank you all.
Okay, thank you. Bye. So finally, joining us to round out our first day, we're going to hear from representatives of Reich Swan about breeding, in this case, gherkins, for different markets. With us today, we have Sam McGovern, Product Development Specialist, and Joe Benson, who is the Florida Farm Station Manager. So Sam and Joe, I will hand it over to you.
My name is Joe Benson, and I'm the station manager for Reich Swan. Our farm is located in a small community called Felda, which is about 11 miles northeast from the city of Immokalee. Our current crop portfolio is gherkin, watermelon, bell pepper, squash, radish, spinach, broccoli, cabbage, kale, iceberg and romaine lettuce, Swiss chard, and cantaloupe. Florida is very warm, rainy, and humid. This type of weather makes for high disease and insect pressures here in the south, and it makes it very difficult to preserve our crops here on the farm. We breed for these challenges, so finding the right balance is often a difficult task in our breeding work. Breeding in South Florida is important and necessary in that companies like ours can develop vegetable varieties that resist disease, insect pests, weather extremes, along with other environmental factors. Florida is one of the most important growing regions in North America for our winter vegetables. Breeding in general improves the quality, flavor, and shelf life of our food. It makes positive improvements for people everywhere. Breeding also offers varieties that allow people to eat their favorite vegetables anytime during the year.
My name is Sam McGowan, and I'm a gherkin crop specialist for Reichswan USA, and I'm based out of Goldsboro, North Carolina, and covering the southern half of the United States. My colleague Rob Gross is based out of Ontario and covers the northern US and Canada. The word gherkin has a lot of different meanings depending on what part of the world that you're in, but we use it simply to refer to any pickling type cucumber. There are many different types of gherkin hybrids on the market. Reichswan hybrids are parthenocarpic, have excellent fresh and brined quality, and offer high yields to the grower. Parthenocarpy means the ability of a plant to set fruit without pollination, and parthenocarpic varieties eliminate the need for bees and for male pollinizer seed. Without having to worry about pollination, we also don't have to worry about the weather being suitable pollinator flight, which can be a big advantage to growers. Parthenocarpic varieties have higher yield potential, better shape, and a firmer seed cavity. The fact that they don't get pollinated means that there's no seed, which can be an advantage to the quality also. Within our portfolio, we have a wide selection of hybrids, which are suited to different growing styles and different conditions. Our gherkin varieties are used successfully in hand harvest and machine harvest programs. And in fact, some growers have found that a successful program can be to go in initially and hand harvest a field and then clean up with the machine harvester after regrowth. After gherkins are harvested, they go through a grading process to separate by size and remove any coals. After that, the paths begin to diverge depending on what type of pickle they're destined to become. The first distinction is between fresh pack versus processed. Fresh pack pickles go straight to the processing line while fresh and will be preserved by either pasteurization or refrigeration. Processed pickles go into a brine tank to be preserved for later use. These are sometimes called brined or fermented type pickles. Traditionally, fermentation was the only way to preserve pickles before refrigeration and pasteurization became common alternatives. Fermentation is still used commonly today because it allows the gherkins to be stored in bulk while waiting to be packed, and it also provides a different flavor profile that some consumers prefer. During fermentation, the gherkins are submerged in a salty brine, which favors the action of specific microorganisms. The gherkins undergo fermentation, which turns the sugars in the gherkin into lactic acid. The combination of lactic acid and salt preserves the pickled gherkins for later use. Beyond the simple difference in preservation method, there are many different ways to turn a gherkin into a value-added product. If we think in terms of walking down the pickle aisle in the grocery store, your bread and butter items and kosher dills are examples of fresh pack products, whereas hamburger dill chips and relish are examples of some fermented products. Oftentimes people see pickles as just a sandwich condiment, and it's true that over half of the pickles Americans consume each year are consumed with a sandwich. But there's a huge assortment in the pickle world. A pickle is not just a pickle. There is a pickle for just about any flavor profile: sweet, salty, garlic, sour, hot, sweet and hot. And then on top of these various flavor options, there are different sizes and different cuts. Spears, stackers, chunks, chips, and slices. With all this variety, pickle processors take a single crop, gherkins, and make literally hundreds of unique products. I don't know of any other vegetable with so much variety in the finished product line. We try to stay in frequent contact with the folks using our varieties so that we can provide technical support and try to provide proactive suggestions for any growing challenges. We are all learning together. There's not a one-size-fits-all recipe for successful gherkin production. Every year seems to throw in a new challenge with different weather, so it's important that we're always learning in order to build a better variety and a better growing program for the future. The most important consideration when helping a grower select a variety is making sure that they'll be able to sell what they produce. So we have to provide a variety that is suited for the length and quality requirements of their particular processor. Secondly, we shoot for something that'll stand up to their growing environment, growing practices, harvest practices, and something that gives the best overall yield. It's a big puzzle to put together, and since you never know what a given season will bring, it's usually best to have more than one variety in the program. As seed suppliers, we're at the start of a long supply chain focused on one goal: delivering quality pickles to the consumer. If the product doesn't suit the end user, it doesn't matter what we can offer the grower from a yield standpoint. Similarly, if the quality is there with a particular hybrid, but it doesn't have the agronomic traits for the grower to produce it profitably, then the whole chain falls apart. We're constantly involving the growers and processors in the search for a better pickle so that we can make sure we're steering the ship in the right direction. Pickles have always been one of my favorite foods, and in fact I liked them so much as a kid that one year I got a gallon jar of fresh kosher dills for Christmas. But right now my top shelf in my refrigerator is covered with an assortment of different pickles, but I'd have to say my favorite is just the classic fermented dill. It's hard to beat.
Thanks, Sam and Joe. Great presentation. I'll have you come up and join me for the Q&A. Welcome.
Thanks, Bethany.
Hello.
Great. We actually have a question here waiting. Can you talk more about the parthenocarpic trait? Is that something available to home gardeners?
Sure, yeah. Parthenocarpy is just a genetic trait that's found naturally in the cucumber genome worldwide, and it's been put into our commercial hybrids through traditional breeding methods. And it simply allows the plant to set fruit without needing to be pollinated. Traditionally, most cucumber varieties or gherkin varieties that have been on the market have required pollination to set fruit. And with parthenocarpy, that's not necessary. And this trait is available to home gardeners. There are many varieties, some of our Right Swan varieties included, that are sold in seed catalogs. And so they are available for sure. Some of the ones that I see most often of our varieties in the home garden seed catalogs are Puccini, and sometimes Bernstein, if you're just, those are two names that you may come across in some of the common home garden catalogs.
Great, thank you. Another question, how many gherkins are grown in the US and in what regions?
So the data that the USDA tracks is the combination of all cucumbers, gherkins included, and they track about 100,000 acres or a little over 100,000 acres nationally in the US. And we estimate that about 3/4 of those or a little more are gherkins grown for processing. Regionally, the pickle industry is kind of centered around the Great Lakes region.
and then also the East Coast, kind of from Delaware south to Florida, quite a bit grown in Florida. And then it kind of follows where the processors are. So there's large processors around the Great Lakes and then a few down this way. And then outside of that, that's the core of the industry. There's small pockets all over Texas and California are some of the notable ones.
Thank you. Can you tell us what the lifespan is of the varieties, of your varieties in the field?
Yeah, that's a good question. One of the main benefits for parthenocarpic traits in particularly hand harvest gherkins are the longevity of harvests. Whereas just speaking out of examples here in North Carolina, with a traditional seeded variety, a grower would expect 5 to 6 picks off of a hand harvest field. And when they move to parthenocarpic, to our hybrids, they typically get 8 to 10 picks. So it can be as much as double. And extreme examples, we see some growers getting 20 picks, and that's a pretty big boost over the traditional seeded varieties. And there are even more extreme examples up where my colleague Rob is based in Ontario. They do special harvest methods where they ride on harvest aids, and so there's very little vine disturbance. And so they might start picking a field at the beginning of July and pick it for well over a month on those same vines. So that's a huge benefit to parthenocarpic hybrids.
Thank you. So what do you see as the biggest challenge to breeding gherkins today? And then going along with that, where do you see opportunities?
Yeah, that's a good question. Certainly disease is a big challenge. Our biggest disease problem in gherkins is downy mildew. And downy mildew is anywhere where you have a lot of moisture and humidity pretty much. And so it's a huge problem in our major production areas. And the disease evolves fairly rapidly. So we have a lot of fungicides that 10 years ago were highly effective on downy mildew and now are not effective at all. So it tends to stay ahead of the fungicide cycle with resistance. So a big goal and a big challenge in breeding is breeding in that downy mildew resistance. And at the same time, we want to bring in the downy mildew resistance without taking out any other beneficial traits like yield. So balancing all of those things is definitely a big challenge.
Definitely. So do you have any advice for home gardeners looking to grow cucumbers for pickling? What should they look for when selecting varieties?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Of course, there's a lot of options out there. I think that parthenocarpic varieties are a big benefit for home gardeners. And part of the reason why is that in a very small planting like you typically have in a home garden, you might not have enough space that you want to dedicate any of it to pollinizer plants to bring in that male flower. So if you're going to have hybrids, it really helps to have parthenocarpic hybrids where you don't need to dedicate that extra space to pollinizers and where you don't have to worry about the pollination occurring. So I think that that's a big thing to look for. And another thing that can typically help in a limited space environment and where you really want to get as much production out of one plant as possible is trellising, or having a support for the cucumbers to climb on. That can really help extend the life of that plant and get some more production out of it.
It's really helpful. Thank you. Well, we're waiting for a few more questions to come in. I'll ask you a question that I've asked the others. How has COVID impacted your operations, either your breeding programs, labor, or any other challenges that you've experienced?
Joe, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, I'll take that. Just like speakers mentioned, we have challenges here, but for the most part, the farm's been open and the company's very cognizant of giving us the resources to be able to fall within the code requirements. For example, some of the engineering controls we on our office are like UV on our inlet air conditioner. We still wear face masks, but that helps with virus. And then we use a lot of the tools. Emily Powwow, who's a colleague of mine here, she works closely with the crops and the breeders. She uses a lot of FaceTime, phone calls, and then meeting with dealers out in the field, social distancing. Manageable, but it does pose some challenges for us, but we seem to pretty well here at the farm. Most of the rest of the folks are working from home just like everybody else.
Mm-hmm. Great, thank you. That's good to hear. Any other questions from the group? Well, Joe and Sam, do you have any final words, anything else that you want to share with the group?
Well, I'll mention that this is a very challenging environment here in South Florida. I grew up in the Salinas Valley out in California, and I did most of my farming under a research umbrella for 32 years over there, and I've been here for about 5 years. And this is a great place to do breeding in for our varieties. Like Sam said, downy mildew on chickens, and the pressure here is very high, so it gives us the ability to screen and develop resistance in those varieties. One thing I learned when I came here to is if you turn around, something's happened. It's a very, very harsh environment.
Definitely. I got one more question in. How has consumer demand changed over the years, and how are you working through breeding to meet that demand?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Of course, pickles have been around a long, long time, and I think for the most part, pickles are still pickles, but the industry has innovated in a lot of ways on the, offerings to retail consumers. There's a lot more variety now than I think there was even 5 years ago, from different flavors and now different convenience items. Convenience is a big deal with small portable packaging and, snack size packaging. That's been a big deal. And one thing that I think that has done that's affected the breeding size is we've probably got more demand for small size gherkins now than we did 10 years ago. There's been a lot of the growth in the retail side has been for the baby size or petite size pickles. And so we're looking at different ways to provide varieties that really perform well for harvesting very small grades. And some of that is, of course, it's easier to get small grades off of hand harvest than off of machine harvest. So while machine harvest remains dominant and remains a big part of our breeding program, we've kind of been influenced to take another look at some ways to go for the hand harvest market, and particularly hand harvest for small pickles. A lot of that is done on trellis. So we're looking at varieties that climb well and varieties that will stand up for a really, really long time. Since you don't get very many at one time when you're picking for small fruit, you have to go in again and again and again. And disease resistance is a big part of that. And just production over a very long period of time is a big part of that. And of course, this is hopefully a one-time thing, but another thing I'll just add is that COVID certainly affected demand at one time for food service versus retail. And I think we've seen a lot of that bounce back. But in the pickle industry, food service is mostly large sizes that are going to be cut up to go on, burgers and sandwiches or go to deli spears. And there's been a lot of whiplash on that end with COVID, as there has been for the whole food supply chain. But it's just been interesting to see how a shock like that can affect demand of something like pickles.
Yeah. Very interesting. Thank you. Well, so that wraps up day one. I want to thank you both for joining us and sharing your insight on gherkins. Great discussion. And thank you to all of you in the audience for tuning in. I'm going to have my contact information on the screen, and feel free to send in any questions that you may not have thought of, but hopefully you can be back to join us here tomorrow, same place, same time, where we're going to hear from Bayer on a collaborative approach to breeding peppers for growers and consumers, Syngenta on leveraging watermelon germplasm diversity for diverse markets, and we'll hear from the lead of the University of Florida's citrus research program to discuss innovations like gene editing and the future of plant breeding. So we look forward to seeing you then. Thanks everyone, and have a great rest of the day.